And we're back. You're listening to the Talkin' Boxing with Billy C show. Check out our website, www.billycboxing.com. And while you're at it, follow us on Twitter. It's real easy. It's at Talkin' Boxing. Let me spell it for you, okay? It's at Talkin', Talkin, Boxing, Boxing. We'd appreciate it. We're looking to get, 100,000 followers. I don't know. Follow us on Twitter. Hey, listen, there's a great new book out right now. It's on Tony Zale, and I'm holding it right here, right, so you can see it. And it's called Tony Zale, The Man of Steel. And joining me right now, I think we got them both on the line, are the co-authors, Thad Zale and my man Clay Moyle. Are you guys there?
Yes, we are.
All right. Hey, technology is a great thing, huh? We got you both on the line. I appreciate you joining us and tell us about this book. First of all, my first question is, Thad. I mean, what was it like doing this book? I mean, obviously there's some personal interest here.
Well, it's been a long labor of love, Billy. My uncle asked me back in 1987, if you can believe it, if I would put together this biography of his, and it's been a long process. Thank the good Lord for Clay, because he forced me to actually finish this thing.
Jeez, at what, Clay? I mean, that's good. You get some accolades like that. I mean, that's good stuff. But I guess you got the pedigree, right?
Yeah, that's right. But you know what, Billy, what was really cool about this was, I'd already decided that I was interested in writing one about Tony. And when I started calling around, someone suggested that I said to call Ted. And when I spoke to Ted, I found out about his, that this was already in the works with him, and that he'd done more than 50 hours of taped interviews with his uncle and family and friends. So there was obviously a tremendous amount of information that was already available that I never would have had access to.
Oh, so I see. I didn't know that. So in other words, Clay, you were setting out to do the book on Tony Zale on your own, and then you found out that Tad already had this in the works, and you guys decided to team up. Is that what happened?
Yeah, I actually had no idea that somebody was already planning a new one from the Zale family, and I was starting to make some preliminary calls to see if someone might be available to provide some information concerning Tony's personal life. And then when I connected with Ted, that's when he let me know that he'd about his promise to his uncle, and that he'd already done all this preliminary work, and he was the one who actually suggested that we team up on this project.
Hey, Tad, this book contains not only extensive coverage of his boxing career inside the ring, but you guys also kind of dive into some issues outside of the ring. Is there anything that you can talk to us about on that right now?
Well, keep in mind that Tony did have a life outside the ring, and he really ran into some headwinds as he came to the end of his boxing career. He didn't realize, exactly what he was going to face once he left the ring, but he knew he was going to have some difficulty. He was beginning, or at least in the mid-level of a divorce. He was trying to keep his kids. He tried 3 times in the courts to get custody of his kids, but unfortunately the times dictated otherwise, so the courts would not approve it. But unfortunately, along that same line and same venue, Tony decided that maybe I ought to invest some of this money. I know I'm going to lose it anyway, at least half of it. So why not invest in something like the Tucker automobile? And that became, unfortunately, the end of his finances in terms of his ring winnings. Clay, you want to go into that a little bit about Mr. Tucker?
Well, Billy, you're probably familiar with that movie that was made about the Tucker automobile. You recall ever seeing that?
Yeah, I actually, believe it or not, I actually have a die-cast model of the Tucker. So yeah, I'm familiar with that.
Yeah, it was a very cool-looking car, and Jeff Bridges, I think, was the star of that movie. But I mean, it was incredibly innovative for its time. But for whatever reason, I think probably because it didn't really have the strong backing of a major corporation like General Motors or Ford or Buick, one of those. But you know, the bottom line was, despite how innovative and cool looking that car was, it, you know, ended up losing a ton of money. So, you know, anybody who invested any money into that venture, you know, lost all their money, of course. So that, like Ted said, that was a huge setback for him.
You know, the thing was, is if he would have invested, if that opportunity came to him, you know, 15 years earlier, it probably would have been completely opposite, because during that time when the Tucker was trying to come out, that's when that merge of General Motors and you know, the other big companies were taking place, and they were phasing out what I'm going to refer to as like a mom and pop automaker, and that's kind of what the Tucker was doing, at least from what I recall. But as far as Tony's boxing career, you know, compared to today, I mean, it's really it's not even fair, in my opinion. But what I see, guys, a lot with doing the show and communicating with a lot of the younger fans, I'm not so sure that they can appreciate the type of fighter Tony Zale was during his active career, and of course the fighters that he had to fight during his active career. What do you see, you know, in comparison with his era compared to today's?
You asking? You want me to field that, or Ted?
Either you guys, you know, whichever one, you know, whoever feels most comfortable. You know, I'm tossing up the softball, and I don't care who hits it.
Yeah, I let Clay hit the home runs when it came to the boxing portion of it. I, of course, had just been born the year that he lost his title, and though I have heard many stories and have taped interviews of him and his actual fights, you know, it's wonderful to have Clay as the second in this, because he really is first when it comes to the boxing portion of the book.
So what do you think?
To answer your question, Bill, I think that obviously the 40s and 50s are, you know, I think a lot of people view those as the kind of the golden era of boxing in terms of the level of competition and the skill of the fighters from that period of time. It was kind of an era where you know, it's kind of viewed more as a modern era of boxing, and but at the same time still being an era where fighters fought so much more frequently and came up through the ranks through you know, there was a bazillion boxing gyms around the country still at that period of time, and it wasn't really until, I believe, really into the 50s that television exploded in terms of providing the exposure for boxing on television. So up until that period, you still had all these small boxing gyms throughout the country where fighters had to ply their trade initially and really hone their skills before they, you know, received an opportunity to become a contender for a title, and you know, they just really had to earn their stripes as compared to today. You know, you have fighters today that are world champions after, you know, 20 fights, and you know, that was this period in the 40s was still, and 30s was still a period where, you know, they might have 20 fights in a year.
Right, and the other thing too, during that era, you know, your career wasn't over if you lost a fight. You know, I mean, it was just a learning process. But hey, Tad, let me ask you this: from you know, the Tony the person, not the fighter. Did he like boxing? Was he a fan of boxing? I mean, did he enjoy what he did, or did he feel that he did this out of necessity?
Well, a little bit of both, but I have to tell you, Tony loved boxing. His first fight was at 15. It was the first time he got hit in the solar plexus, and decided that maybe that ought to be his punch for the future. And, you know, he had done boxing before that, but never in an organized setting. Our family had a little home gym in the barn, and they made good use of the punching bags that they made and the ring that they set up, and they kept things clean in order to make sure that they had plenty of room so that their next-door neighbors and them could all put on the gloves and give it a try. So he truly did love it from, I guess, his earliest experience around 8 years old watching my dad fight. And his other brother, John, were both I guess they called them Middle States champions, one at a featherweight and one at a lightweight. So they really it was part of the family. It was ingrained in us. I had my first organized bout at 5, and I'll tell you, I still have a sore nose from it.
You decided to go in a different direction, right? After that, you know.
Well, Uncle worked with me in my teens, and he said, the first thing I want you to do is get your college education. You do that first, then you can ply the trade if you're interested. And, of course, like you said many times, there's a lot easier way to make a living than in the ring. But he did love it, truly loved it.
Well, that's a good thing too. A lot of those fighters they loved it, and then there was a lot that did it out of necessity. But hey, Clay, what after you evaluated his whole career, Tony Zale's whole career, what were the most significant fights in your opinion? Were they the same ones that are generally looked upon as his greatest fights, or did you find any sleepers that maybe the viewers and listeners should try to look into?
Well, of course, everybody or most people know about the trilogy with Rocky Graziano. Those are the most famous fights that he had because they were kind of the Mickey Ward, Arturo Gatti fights of that period of time. It's still considered amongst the greatest trilogies of all time. But beyond those three, I guess I think of at least a couple of his fights with Al Hostak, I think, were particularly significant. And Hostak is a fellow that most boxing historians and fans are familiar with, but a lot of boxing folks have long forgotten about. But he was he was a great middleweight fighter in his own right. Won the title from Freddie Steele. I think it was around 1936, or might have been 38. I'd have to double check. But Hostak was a guy that Jack Dempsey officiated that fight against Steele and referred to him as the hardest hitting middleweight he'd ever seen, I believe. And so it was a real accomplishment when Tony surprised him and defeated him by a decision in 1940, and then 7 months later had a rematch in Seattle and took the title from him. So those were really significant bouts.
Hey, Tad, the title is interesting. Tony Zale, the Man of Steel, that's a part everybody, knows of Tony Zale. I mean, obviously it was his nickname and everything. But right on the front of the book, the next thing that jumps out, at least to me, is his toughest battles weren't fought inside the ring. Can you tell us a little about that?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I mentioned the Tucker, and of course Tony thought he would double his money instead of losing it all. What do you do when you have nothing? Do you go to your brothers? Do you go to your cousins to see if you can put some money together? No, Tony took it on the chin, and he just literally pulled himself up by his bootstraps. From 1950 on, literally, he had 4 part-time jobs. One was with the Chicago CYO that he always considered his major fight, his major income, major production in terms of any cash value. But if you work for the Catholic Youth Organization, you didn't make a lot of money. So he had a tough time making ends meet. And as a result of that, he joined not only the Navy Reserves, but was also in the Army Reserves. And then he did refereeing on the side whenever he could fit it in between all of those occupations. So, I never knew that anyone could be both Army and Navy Reserves, but Tony did it. And he was able to save enough, scrounge enough. He didn't have to go to family. He could have. Literally, anybody would have helped him in the family without a question. But he wanted to do it on his own, just like he did in the boxing ring. He put it all together on his own, and, even though things were tough, he was able to make it dig out just the way he did in the ring.
He was also living at the YMCA for a period of time with a sleeping bag.
How
Yeah,
old?
Yeah, it sure was.
How old was Tony Zale? What was his age when he hung up the gloves?
36.
So from roughly, the time, so basically from his 40s through the rest of his life, he was pretty much had to do what you're saying, that he was working all these different jobs and stuff just to make ends meet.
Well, it took him about 6 years before he really started coming around. By around 1958, he was starting to see some headwind and able to actually get out of the Y and out of the settlement house on the south side of Chicago. I mean, literally, he used to, he lived in a tenement house that a bank owned, and they literally had him act as the night watchman, the supervisor of that facility. And he would run, one of the interesting things about it was there was no heat, no running water. So he had a sleeping bag and a small space heater that he used, and he'd literally run from the south side of Chicago to the north side to the CYO gym in order to shower and shave. It was a Spartan existence, to say the least. But he did it. He went through it. He never complained about it. He didn't say one thing to anybody in the family that he was having a tough time. He would even hitchhike home from a summer camp rather than take the bus so he could save the bus fare. It was a tough time, and he gave us, through his example, the courage to continue on, even in our own recessionary periods that we go through in this country. He showed some real guts in terms of what he could do and why he did it. And the book really explains what his journey was and what his mission was after the ring.
Truly a man of steel. I mean, it shows his character right there. I don't think many people today would go through those extremes. I think they would be pretty quick to go and try and get help. I applaud that. I never knew that about Tony, and that brings me to another question. I know, obviously, being related, you know a lot of things about your uncle, but during this process of putting this book together, and Clay, I'm sure you learned things about Tony Zale you didn't know during the research, but Tad, did you learn some things about your uncle that you didn't know before you started this project?
Hundreds of things. Honestly, when he was up here, he would come up to Michigan for long weekends once a month. He did that for about 4 years, and the things I discovered about this man, made me admire him more. He still humbles me to this day. What he was able to do with literally nothing. It's an incredible journey of character that you're able to go through in the book. And again, he truly is a humbling individual to try to live up to.
Clay, you've been involved in some projects with some fascinating fighters that you've written some books on. How does Tony compare? It seems like, you're attracted to these types of, personalities, that, transcend what we're used to today. I mean, it's a breath of fresh air for me looking in from the outside, but how does it feel to you?
Yeah, after writing about Sam Langford and Billy Miskey, I was looking for another project, and, I like to write about individuals that, interest me and inspire me as well. So I like to write about guys that, obviously are great fighters. They exhibit a lot of courage inside the ring, but they also are individuals that come across as men of integrity. And, that's what struck me about Tony Zale as I was searching for another subject to write about. I'd heard some stories about him already from Al Hostak, who I was fortunate enough to meet in the early 1990s, and he told me some stories about Tony. And and through some of my own research, I started to, much like in the same way I did with Billy Miskey and Sam Langford, begin to gain a much greater appreciation for him. So he just jumped out at me as a fellow that would be, again, really interesting to write about, and someone that I'd be proud to know had I had the opportunity.
I'm really excited about this book, because one of my issues with the sport of boxing today, and it's by no fault of their own, but a lot of the younger fans just don't have the knowledge of these kinds of fighters. And as great as Tony Zale was, it's almost like he's a forgotten fighter. I mean, we know that there's a lot of fighters out there that are forgotten, but they didn't accomplish what Tony Zale accomplished. And it makes me, glad to see that, we can rekindle the interest in these types of fighters. What do you each feel about that? We can start off with you Tad. What's your opinion on relighting the fire, so to speak, for Tony Zale?
Well, I truly hope that the book does that, and it should, because he really was someone to admire. And the fighters of today, I think Rocky says it best when he talks about it on the way it was. They're not like they were in yesteryear. These guys fought because they loved the sport. It wasn't necessarily the money, though that money did help. It was for the sport, and that's what they went in there to do. Uncle Tony, when he started fighting, his first 6 months, he had 21 bouts. Today, you're lucky if you get one championship bout a year. It's just not the same. And, that has its good points and also has its bad points. But Tony Zale was far more than just a man in the ring. He helped a lot of people outside of it, and that's what the story and the mission really was.
You say that, I have to laugh about the 21 fights because today, if a fighter fights 4 times in 1 year, everybody wants to make him the fighter of the year, because he was so busy, and here we are, a guy starting out, he fights 21 times. What was your thoughts on rekindling or relighting the history of Tony Zale, Clay? What do you think? You think that some of these younger fans are going to appreciate it, maybe look more into this guy, or what?
Well, I hope so. I mean, I agree with you, Billy. I think there's a lot of great fighters from the past that, the generation today doesn't know anything about or very little about. I mean, during the course of, this was a 4-year project, and during the course of it, I'd have people ask me what I was up to from time to time, and I'd tell them, occasionally I'd bring up the subject of working on this book, and usually I'd get a blank stare, or most people wouldn't know who Tony Zale was.
It's a shame.
And then I'd typically ask them if they knew who Rocky Graziano was, and a lot of people did know who he was because he's much more well known. He was a very colorful character. There was a Paul Newman movie made about him, and but the fact of the matter is that Tony Zale fought him in 3 title fights, 2 of those which were named Fight of the Year by the Ring magazine, amongst the greatest trilogies of all time, and Tony Zale was the greater fighter of the 2 by far. I mean, he won 2 out of those 3 contests, and I think it's just a shame that so many people have forgotten about him. So yeah, I'm very hopeful that this book helps bring him to light again.
Hey, Clay, let me ask you another question about Tony Zale and some of the younger fans. One of the things I run into all the time, because we do a segment on this show called The Blast from the Past, and we revisit, fighters of yesteryear, trying to do exactly what you guys are doing with this book, keep the memories alive. But one of the things I come across all the time with today's young fan, and I'm saying young, anybody from like 40 years old and younger, they want to touch it, feel it, meaning they want to watch video. So when I say something like, for an example, Jack Johnson was, in my opinion, one of the greatest, if not the greatest heavyweight of all time, and then they go and they look at that rare footage you see of him, and they go, oh, this guy was slow, he was this and that. And I try to explain, well, listen, this is 1900. The guy is cranking the movie projector by hand. They're doing it outside, and they're not taking into consideration the quality of the film, et cetera, et cetera. Today we're looking at high definition and all of that. My question is there enough film on Tony Zale available for the viewers and listeners to go and check out some of it? And if it is it of good quality?
Well, I think the first one that comes to mind is the 3rd fight with Rocky Graziano. Anybody can go on YouTube and pull that one up. Just enter Tony Zale and Rocky Graziano in YouTube, and you can find that 3rd fight. And to me, that's a pretty good representation of his fighting style, and you'll see one of the classic knockouts of all time at the end of that fight. Beyond that, I believe there's probably probably film of him fighting Serdan on there as well. I'm not sure beyond that how much film is readily available.
Yeah, there's a couple of 16 millimeter films. One on Billy Seuss, and the other with an amateur bout. No, nothing on Billy Conn at all. They just didn't think that the movie rights were necessary during that time, and it's just too bad because that Rocky Graziano third fight was just incredible, and his right to the body, left hook to the chin is just ready to be patented after watching that. So
yeah, that's prominently.
I just wish there were more footage for sure.
Yeah, it would definitely help with today's young fan, because like I said, the most constant thing I hear is that they like to go and watch, and make their own judgment. They don't like where I'll look, and especially with, like Clay, you mentioned the Sam Langford book. When I read that and loved some going back and reading some of the points that other writers made, and the same thing I'm sure with Tony Zale. Young fans today, they don't want to believe what a writer says. Just because 9,000 writers wrote how great the fighter was, I want to watch the video. So that's the only thing I see with the mentality, and hopefully a project like this is going to change all of that.
Well, when I run across that kind of comment, though, the thing that I try to look for beyond just what the writers write about them is what the contemporaries have to say, such as trainers, managers, and other boxers and fighters. So, when those kind of guys are singing the same praises, then, that to me really says a lot. And I think you'll find that that's the case in regards to not only Sam Langford, but, fighters like Tony Zale and Billy Miskey, of course, as well.
Tony Zale, The Man of Steel, written by Tad Zale and Clay Moyle. You could get yourself a copy of this by actually visiting our website, www.billycboxing.com, and going into the book club. There's a photo of the book cover, and it's linked right to where you go. But you also have a website, right, guys? Where should they go to get it?
Yeah, it's on tonyzale.org, O-R-G. And we also have a clip from the last Zale Graziano fight in there as well.
Beautiful. Guys, I appreciate you taking the time. Good luck with the book, and maybe we can have you both come on again after I get through it. It got to me so quick, I didn't finish it, and I'm looking forward to it. It's next up for me, and as soon as I'm done, if you don't mind, I'd like to have you back on so I can ask you some questions.
Yeah,
sure, we'd love to.
All right, guys, good luck with the book. I'm glad you guys undertook this project, and I'm glad you had some time to spend with us tonight. I look forward to seeing you guys again, all right?
All right,
great. Thank you, Billy.
All right, take care. Tony Zale, Man of Steel. His toughest battles weren't fought inside the ring. You got to get yourself a copy of this book right now. TonyZale.org. You can go directly to the website, check out what they got there. Or if you are on our website all the time, just check it out, www.billycboxing.com. And under the book club section, you'll see it. It's right there on the top. All you got to do is click the book, and you'll be directed right to the website. Hey, I'm going to take a break. When I come back, I got some more stuff to talk about. We'll be back in 2.
If you want